The rain drummed softly against the window pane, a gentle rhythm that filled the silence of the small, dimly lit kitchen. Emma stood by the counter, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea, the warmth seeping into her palms. The glow of the stove's light flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls. It had been one of those long, solitary days where time seemed to stretch on endlessly, each hour bleeding into the next. As she gazed out at the misty world beyond the glass, she found herself lost in thought, reflecting on the events that had brought her here. Life had a strange way of twisting and turning, leading her down paths she never could have imagined. The move to this old house on the outskirts of town had been meant as a fresh start, a place where she could find peace away from the noise and chaos of the city. But instead, she found herself confronting a different kind of silence, one that echoed through the empty rooms and lingered in the quiet moments between dusk and dawn. Just as she took a sip of her tea, savoring the bittersweet taste, a faint sound caught her attention. A creak of the floorboards behind her. Emma turned, her heart skipping a beat, and saw a figure standing in the doorway, illuminated by the soft light spilling in from the hall. It was Alex, her cousin's daughter, a bright smile playing on her lips despite the late hour. "Did I scare you?" Alex asked, a playful glint in her eyes as she stepped into the kitchen, the rain-dampened edges of her coat dripping onto the floor. Emma let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "A little. I didn't hear you come in." Alex shrugged, tossing her coat over the back of a chair. "The storm was louder than I thought," she said, running a hand through her damp hair. "I thought you might be asleep by now." Emma set down her mug, crossing her arms as she leaned against the counter. "I couldn't sleep, so I came down for some tea. Want a cup?" Alex nodded, and Emma busied herself with preparing another mug. As she worked, she could feel Alex's gaze lingering on her, a subtle weight that she couldn't quite place. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, just different, like the energy in the room had shifted with her arrival. She pushed the thought away, focusing on the familiar motions of pouring hot water and steeping the tea leaves. When she turned back around, she found Alex watching her with a thoughtful expression, her head tilted slightly to the side. "What is it?" Emma asked, curiosity getting the better of her. Alex hesitated for a moment, then let out a soft sigh, her smile fading into something more serious. "I was just thinking, it's nice to have a place like this," she said quietly, glancing around the cozy kitchen. "I've been feeling a little lost lately. Being here with you, it's different. Calming, you know?" Emma felt a pang of empathy as she handed Alex the tea. She understood all too well what it meant to feel lost, to seek out a space where the world seemed to slow down for just a while. She had come to this house for much the same reason, though she rarely spoke about it. "I'm glad you feel that way," she replied, offering a small smile. "It's nice having you here too, even if it's just for a little while." They sat together at the small kitchen table, sipping their tea in companionable silence. Outside, the rain continued to fall, creating a soothing backdrop to their quiet conversation. As the minutes slipped by, Emma found herself relaxing, drawn into the easy rhythm of their exchange. It had been a long time since she'd had company like this, someone who made the silence feel less empty. But beneath the warmth of their shared moment, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else, something unspoken in the way Alex looked at her. She tried to dismiss it as her imagination, but the thought lingered, like a shadow in the back of her mind. The night wore on as the rain persisted, creating a curtain of water outside the windows that blurred the view of the world beyond. Emma and Alex sat together, the small lamp on the counter casting a warm glow over the kitchen. It was one of those rare moments that felt timeless, where the outside world seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them in their little bubble. "So, what's been going on with you?" Emma asked, her curiosity genuine. "I know you've been dealing with a lot lately. How's school? Work?" Alex stirred her tea slowly, her expression growing thoughtful. "It's been hard, honestly," she admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I thought I had everything figured out, you know. I thought I knew what I wanted, but now I'm not so sure." Emma nodded, leaning forward slightly as she listened. There was a vulnerability in Alex's voice that she hadn't heard before, a rawness that made her heart ache. "I get that," she said softly. "Sometimes it feels like the whole world is moving so fast, and you're just trying to keep up. But it's okay to not have all the answers right now." Alex met Emma's gaze, her eyes searching, as if looking for something she couldn't quite put into words. "Thanks, Emma," she said after a moment, a small grateful smile tugging at her lips. "You've always known how to make me feel better, even when I don't really know what I'm feeling." Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest at Alex's words, a sense of closeness that was both comforting and a little unsettling. She reached out, giving Alex's hand a gentle squeeze, feeling the coolness of her skin beneath her fingers. "I'm here for you, Alex. Whatever you need, you know that, right?" Alex nodded, her smile growing a little more genuine, and for a while, they lapsed back into silence, sipping their tea as the storm raged outside. But there was a new tension in the air now, a subtle shift that Emma couldn't ignore. It was in the way Alex's fingers lingered against hers, the way her gaze would drift over Emma's face, as if trying to memorize every detail. As the minutes slipped by, Emma found herself hyper-aware of the small space between them, the warmth of Alex's presence so close beside her. She told herself that it was just the quiet of the night playing tricks on her mind, that the intimacy of the moment didn't mean more than what it seemed. But deep down, she wasn't sure she believed it. Eventually, Alex broke the silence, her voice barely more than a murmur. "Do you ever feel like you're looking for something but you don't even know what it is?" The question caught Emma off guard, striking a chord within her. She took a slow breath, considering her answer carefully. "Yeah," she admitted, her voice tinged with a hint of wistfulness. "I think we all feel that way sometimes. Like there's something missing, something just out of reach. And no matter how hard you try, you can't quite put your finger on it." Alex's gaze softened, and for a moment, they just looked at each other, the rain whispering secrets against the windows. Then, almost as if she couldn't help herself, Alex reached out, her fingertips brushing against Emma's cheek, the touch light and fleeting. It was a small gesture, but it sent a shiver down Emma's spine, her breath catching in her throat. I think maybe I found what I'm looking for," Alex whispered, her hand lingering against Emma's cheek for a moment longer before she pulled back, as if suddenly realizing what she had done. Her cheeks flushed a deep red, and she quickly averted her gaze, looking down at the table. Emma's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. The warmth of Alex's touch lingered on her skin, leaving her both bewildered and strangely exhilarated. She opened her mouth to say something, anything that might break the tension, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself caught in the memory of that touch, the way it had made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. "I'm sorry, that was—" Alex began, her voice faltering, but Emma shook her head, cutting her off gently. "No, it's okay," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "You don't have to apologize." They sat in silence again, but it was a different kind of silence now, one that crackled with unspoken possibilities. Emma could feel the weight of Alex's gaze on her, the uncertainty in her eyes, and she realized that they were standing at the edge of something that neither of them had expected, but that felt strangely right, despite all the reasons it shouldn't. As the storm continued outside, Emma took a deep breath, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She had always been the one to keep things steady, to maintain the boundaries that held their world together. But in that moment, she found herself wondering what would happen if, just this once, she let those boundaries slip. The storm outside grew heavier, the raindrops battering against the window as if urging them to break the fragile silence that had settled between them. Emma's mind buzzed with 100 thoughts, all vying for attention, but none of them clear enough to grasp. The feeling of Alex's fingers against her skin, though fleeting, was still vivid, leaving a warmth that seemed to spread through her entire being. Alex looked down at her hands, fidgeting slightly, clearly unsure of what to say or do next. Her lips parted as if to speak, but then she closed them again, a flush coloring her cheeks. Emma could see the nervous energy radiating from her, a mix of vulnerability and something more that she couldn't quite name. Emma reached out, placing her hand over Alex's again, the gesture slow and deliberate. The touch was gentle, but there was a quiet intensity in the way their fingers brushed against each other, as if testing the boundaries that had always kept them apart. Emma didn't pull away, and neither did Alex. They just sat there, letting the moment stretch on, the air between them thick with anticipation. "Alex," Emma said softly, her voice barely audible above the rain. She wasn't even sure what she wanted to say, only that she needed to break the silence, to find some way to make sense of what was happening. But when Alex turned to her, meeting her gaze, the words caught in her throat. Alex's eyes were filled with something raw and unguarded, something that sent a jolt through Emma's chest. It was a look that spoke of hope and longing, of feelings that had been hidden away for too long. And in that instant, Emma realized that she wasn't the only one struggling with emotions she couldn't fully understand. "I don't want things to be weird between us," Alex murmured, her voice trembling slightly. "You mean so much to me, Emma. I don't want to mess this up." Emma swallowed hard, her heart clenching at the uncertainty in Alex's voice. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them, demanding a response that she wasn't sure she had. But as she looked into Alex's eyes, she realized that she didn't want to let this slip away, even if it meant facing something she had never expected. "Nothing you could do would ever mess this up," Emma replied, her voice firm despite the tumult of emotions swirling inside her. "You're important to me too, more than you know." Alex's expression softened at Emma's words, a small, tentative smile breaking through her uncertainty. For a moment, the tension between them eased, replaced by a quiet sense of understanding. But as the rain continued to pour outside, they both knew that the unspoken questions still lingered. Waiting for answers, neither of them was quite ready to give. They sat together in the dimly lit kitchen, the hours slipping by unnoticed as the storm raged on. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, a low, steady sound that seemed to echo the beat of Emma's heart. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt so on edge, so acutely aware of every breath, every small shift in the air around her. Alex leaned back in her chair, running a hand through her damp hair, and let out a soft sigh. "I don't want to go back tomorrow," she admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I feel like I finally have a place where I can just be myself here. I don't want to leave that behind." Emma's chest tightened at the words, a wave of sympathy and something else she couldn't quite name washing over her. She knew what it was like to feel adrift, to search for a place where you could simply exist without the weight of expectations pressing down on you. And she knew that part of her didn't want Alex to leave either, even if she couldn't quite admit it out loud. "You don't have to go anywhere right now," Emma said gently, her hand still resting over Alex's. "Stay as long as you need. You're welcome here." Alex looked at Emma, her eyes glistening with emotion, and for a moment, it felt like the distance between them had disappeared entirely. There was something almost fragile about the way she leaned forward, closing the gap between them until their foreheads nearly touched, her breath mingling with Emma's. Emma's pulse quickened, a mix of nervousness and anticipation coiling inside her. "Thank you," Alex whispered, her voice cracking slightly. "You don't know how much that means to me." Emma's hand moved almost of its own accord, gently cupping Alex's cheek, her thumb brushing against the softness of her skin. It was a small, tentative gesture, but the intimacy of it left them both breathless. Emma felt the heat of Alex's skin beneath her fingers, the way she seemed to lean into the touch, as if seeking comfort in the contact. Their faces were so close now that Emma could see the way Alex's eyelashes fluttered, could feel the warmth of her breath against her lips. It would have been so easy to close that last bit of distance, to give in to the pull that had been drawing them together all night. But instead, she lingered there, caught between the desire to take that step and the fear of what it might mean. Alex's eyes searched hers, a question lingering in their depths, one that Emma wasn't sure she knew how to answer. But then, in the silence that stretched between them, she felt something shift inside her, something that made her lean forward just enough to press her lips gently to Alex's forehead, a touch that was as much an offering as it was a promise. Alex's breath hitched, and for a moment, they stayed like that, suspended in a space where time seemed to lose all meaning. Then, slowly, Alex turned her head, her cheek brushing against Emma's palm, her lips pressing a soft kiss to the inside of Emma's wrist. It was a touch so light that it felt like a whisper, but it sent a shiver through Emma's entire body, leaving her both yearning and afraid of what might come next. "Emma?" Alex's voice was barely audible, a fragile thread that threatened to break with the weight of everything left unsaid. Emma could feel the tension radiating from her, could see the way her hands trembled slightly as they clung to the edge of the table. But before either of them could speak again, a flash of lightning lit up the sky outside, followed by a crack of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundation of the house. Emma pulled back slightly, the sudden noise snapping them out of the moment, leaving them both breathless and uncertain. They sat in silence, the charged air between them suddenly filled with the sound of the storm. Emma's heart was still racing, her thoughts a chaotic tangle that she couldn't quite unravel. But as she looked at Alex, she realized that whatever had just happened between them, it wasn't something she could ignore or brush aside. Alex offered a small, shaky smile, her cheeks still flushed with the remnants of their shared moment. "I guess the universe has other plans," she said softly, trying to inject some lightness into her voice. But Emma could hear the tremor beneath the words. Emma managed a faint smile in return, though her mind was still reeling. "Yeah, maybe," she replied, though she couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed a threshold tonight, one that they couldn't easily step back from. And as they sat there, listening to the rain and the distant roll of thunder, Emma realized that whatever lay ahead, they would have to face it together, navigating the uncharted waters of their feelings and the uncertainty of what came next.